ground of mustard. We're going to be fitting the Coyote motor in between the frame rails of the F100. So before I can get the motor mocked up between the frame rails, I need to go ahead and get this radiator support on and then figure out where the back of the fans from the radiator are going to be in reference to the front of the engine. Luckily, the company that I'm going to order the radiator from has a CAD drawing on their website showing the depth of the radiator, the fan shroud, and the fans. So I can get a pretty accurate measurement to the back of the fans, and then from there I can give myself a little bit of room from the back of the fans to the front of the engine, so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and get the radiator support put up here, bolted in place, and then we can start getting the engine mounts fabricated and set the motor between the frame rails. Then we'll go ahead and set the cab down, figure out where we have interference, and then cut the floor out of the way for the bell housing, and go from there. By getting the engine in between the frame rails, that'll allow me to make all the cross members and supports for the frame, and then I can go ahead and run all the brake lines, get this thing finished up, weld up the holes that I'll need, grind it down smooth, and then paint it. So let's get started. Alright, so that's roughly square. I'm going to throw another bolt up in here. I only got one in now. I couldn't find the original bolts. Not a big deal. I can get those anywhere. Find me another bolt to put up in here so it doesn't twist anymore. Well, just in case I bump it or something like that. And then we should be ready to weld the motor mounts together. I got those from a company out of Canada, a welder series motor mount. They're specifically for the Coyote motor. And you can pay extra money and have them welded together. It's not that much, but I figured I have a welder and it'd be nice to weld them myself. Alright, to make sure I don't mess this up, because it's only welded one time, I guess I can cut them apart if I needed to. But to not mess this up, I'm going to go ahead and figure out which ones go where. From what I understand, the long side goes up. This is going to be the passenger side one. This will be my driver's side. The holes line up really well. So let's go ahead and get these cleaned up. Got my pieces marked, that way you know which one's which. Go ahead and clean up the opposite side. Take a few measurements. Make sure I have everything centered where I want it. I'm going to tack weld everything up, and then I'll most likely just mount everything and get the engine set before I final weld these, because I'm not sure exactly where they're going to land in relationship to the cross member. And if I need to move some things, I want to be able to move them. Most likely I'm not going to have to move the mounts, but I just want to make sure. I haven't done this before, so I'm really not sure exactly where things are going to land. checked on George Drake lately? Alright, so we need to measure 6 inches back from the radiator support. We need to make a line. So we need level and the mark.
Oh, that's not right. That is pretty good.
6 inches. What I was planning on doing is getting this set in here and tack weld, because we're going to have to put this in place, and then we're going to have to take those and cut them to fit. So we'll trim those like a fish mount that wraps into the frame, and one on this cross member, whatever we need to do, and we'll get that bolted in between the frame rails, and then we'll get the angle correct off of the intake runners right here.
Yeah.
To make sure we get a 3-degree pitch down, and then that'll give us where our tail's going to be, and we'll grab the jack, put that on the tail end of the transmission, and now let's tack weld the engine mounts, the receivers for the engine mounts into place.
So
and then
you have to weld, none of that will get welded together till you know.
That's right, and then we'll tack weld that in place, keep the trans mount over here, and then I can make a temporary cross member, and then that'll be where that sets, and then we'll set the cab on top of it and see where we need to trim.
Okay.
Instead of trying to establish things with the cab on the frame, we'll set the cab on top.
Makes sense.
Everybody get that?
Yeah, pick that up.
Okay.
I'm gonna do it really slow for effect. See, that's when we need music.
So I think it actually might need to come back.
I think to clear that, yeah.
Think so?
Lower it down, see what we got. We got jagged steel over here. Need a tetanus shot. You're way back right there.
And the cab mounts go right here. So that cab can be all up on those heads.
I mean, you got plenty of room forward.
Yeah, maybe more forward. Okay. All right, so we've run into a problem. The factory F100 oil cooler runs into the sway bar on the independent front suspension kit I have. So I've looked it up. MMR has an oil filter relocation kit that I'm going to utilize here, and that'll give me all the space I need to get this motor down in between the frame rails, and then it should clear the sway bar. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pulled off. It looks like it may go into the back of this cover. If so, then the cover's coming off too. Oil cooler is removed from the engine. Go ahead and put this engine back between the frame rails. Alright, so we're running into a problem, like I thought we were going to run into. We got to cut out this firewall to get the transmission to mount up in here, or to pass by with no interference. And then I'll have to create a whole new trans tunnel, which is not a big deal. I got enough sheet metal over there to build a trans tunnel twice over. So we're going to go ahead and cut this firewall out and then get this motor set where we want it to get set before I weld the motor mounts into place. So let's get cutting. What is that? so it's another day. We're back in the truck, trying to finish up this engine install today, get the mounts welded, cross-member fabricating, everything like that. I got the pedals mocked up, trying to see where they fit. I really just have found a hole in the firewall, put a bolt through it, hung the pedals, and see where I fit in the truck. I think you need to be a little bit more over here, which is going to dictate where the gas pedal is. This motor is run by a drive-by wire system, so I can mount that wherever I want to. That's one of the advantages of using the Coyote motor. So we're going to go ahead and pick up where we left off. I need to cut out the firewall to make room for the back of the cylinder heads or sensors that protrude off of there. And also want to get that motor set back so it can clear the crossmember. The oil pan is really close to the crossmember, a little bit too close for my liking. So I'm going to cut the firewall out, move the engine back about 1 or 2 inches, tack weld in the motor mount brackets, and get everything final up. So let's get started cutting out this firewall. All right, now that the firewall's cut out, we've got plenty of room to go ahead and get this motor set where we want it. Center it up in front and back. I got all the room to do everything now. And then I can go ahead and cut down the engine mount brackets. There's 2 pieces. They came in looks like a 6 or 8 inch length. You cut them to fit. We're going to go ahead and get this centered up. Measure from the mounts to the frame, cut them, tack weld them in, and just start getting everything going. Alright, so we make sure we keep the engine centered. I'm going to go ahead and establish the center line here on the floor for the tail shaft of this transmission. See, it's a little loose right now, so it swings back and forth. So what we'll do is I'll take the center line and I'll find a way to stable the transmission right here. We'll do the same thing up on the front for the bolt on the crank pulley, the harmonic belt. 30 and 3/16. Looks to be pretty close. Go ahead and get the front done. You can actually slide this motor back about an inch. Gotta be careful though, my exhaust manifold, you get close to the floorboards over there. Looks to be about where I want it. I think I'm gonna move it forward just a little bit, and then we'll weld these brackets perpendicular to the frame and extend out and catch them up. Let's go ahead and make a couple of paper templates of these guys so I can trim them up, and then once I get those paper templates to fit, I'll transfer that onto this metal and then cut this and tack weld them in. bam, paper templates that I can mess up, get right. I don't know. I only got one set of these, so I don't want to mess these up. I'd rather make a few of these. And I just cut these one time. All right, so we've gotten everything mocked up, put in place where I want it. I'm gonna go ahead and tack weld all 4 of these plates in place, and that should hold it for now. And then later, I'll go ahead and final weld everything in after I've gotten the headers, steering rack, and everything in place. So, already got the ground hooked up, water going, and I'm gonna practice on some 3/16. Make sure I got my settings right, and tack weld these in place. All right, we got 4 good tack welds on each of the motor mount perches. So everything there looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and start taking the cab off now so we can start fabricating the bars that make up the transmission crossmember. All right, now that the motor is hung on the engine mounts, we are going to go ahead and bend up some 1.5 inch outer diameter 1/8 wall tube. We're going to make basically a cradle that sits in here with a transmission mount on the bottom of it, and then on the back I'll also put a crossmember that'll act as like a drive shaft loop, just in case I ever have any issues and break anything, and then I'll also add some integrity to the frame. Not only am I going to put the bottom cradle up here, I'm going to add a top cradle that's going to basically be a carbon copy of the bottom cradle after I get some more tube. So we're going to go ahead and get the tube bender put out on its stand, and then start bending up these tubes. I took the measurements, wrote them down, and it's going to be about 67 inches long. Alright, so this is our bar. It's going to sit in the frame rail, parallel to the frame. We're going to go ahead and bend up the second one. You don't need to watch all that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and mock up these bars. We're going to find out our angles. That these are pointing toward the ground, and we're going to take them, put them up in a jig, make the angles, and then cut the ends so that they can sit flush up the frame so we can tack bar them. Now I just need my angle finder. And get started. Alright, first one's cut. We're going to mock it up. We're going to go ahead and mock it up and make sure it's correct. I hope it's correct, otherwise we're going to be buying some more tube. So let's go ahead and get on the other side and make sure it fits. Looks like my angles aren't perfect, but I think I can trim up the bottom of the back one to get it to sit right. Right now it's still a little bit off, but I'm cutting with the Sawzall, not a miter saw, so it's about as close as I'm going to get. So I'm going to go ahead and get the other side cut, and then I will use my angle grinder to grind down one side to get the angle, exactly how I want, and then bevel the edges and tap it into place. Bevel the edges. They fit pretty well. I'll just stand here and show you guys the fit. So, here's the fit of the tube against the frame rail. I've beveled them so that they are ready to go. They'll accept the weld all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure these two tubes are level left to right, and then we will tack them into place. All right, so we currently sit like this. We have the frame rails, and then we have the new tube support beams, and we want to create a transmission cross member that goes here to hold that transmission mount up. So obviously I want to make it removable so that I can service the transmission or clutch if needed. So I'm going to have to build some brackets off of these tubes that can accept this cross member. So what I'm thinking is I'll go ahead and I have a cross section of the tube like this, and I will go ahead and make a bracket that sits off the tube like this and can accept a bolt, and then the new cross member can come across here somehow. So I'm going to go ahead and get the drawing, figuring out what I think might be best, and this might change. I might build the first one, scrap the idea, and build a second one. But the point is to go ahead and draw it up on paper, figure out exactly what I want, and then go from there. It's just trial and error. I haven't done this before, so I'm going to figure out what works and what doesn't. Might have to bend some tube, might have to go buy some square tube, I'm not sure. But we're going to get started regardless, so that way we can get this engine and transmission hanging without the support of a jack. Alright, so I think I have my first idea. I'm gonna put a bracket on these tubes here. So these are the tubes right here. Let's just draw a cross section of the tube. So you got the tube right here. I'm gonna make a bracket with 245 and then an adjustable slot. And then what I'll do is make a flat 3/16 bar here, and then weld the cross member tube to that, and then make another tube here, or a bracket rather, that is welded to the tube, and then can accept the transmission bolts. So I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting up some 3/16 plate into some rectangles, figuring out my lengths of everything, and go from there. Let's get started. I have transferred my measurements to the steel and made all the marks for it. I'm going to drill holes and where all the bolts go. I'll show you guys real quick what I've done. So I've drawn on here where I'm going to have my slots for adjustments for the bolts, each bracket. These are the brackets that are going on the end of the tubes. This is where the bolts will go through. This is where the tubes will sit. So before I cut any of this out, I'm gonna go ahead and drill all these holes and cut the slots, and then I'll go ahead and detach the pieces from the steel. I find it easier to drill these holes and everything prior to cutting it out. That way everything is really stable while I'm drilling and cutting. So I've got the brackets made, ground down, beveled the edges, made my marks on my tubes, cleaned the tubes so that they're ready for welding, and made my reference marks from the mount over to the tubes. I'm going to set these 1 inch back from the center of these brackets, 1 inch back from the mark that represents the line of this mount. And then I'm going to set the level on top of them to make sure they're both parallel to the bars, tack weld them into place, and then I can start working on getting the cross member and bracket ready. fucking joke. Everything's a joke. Crossmember is fully welded. I'll let that cool and I'll reinstall it, and then I will go ahead and start welding up the tubes that run along the side of the frame, and also the brackets that run along the frame. Alright, that's all I'm going to weld for now. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this cross member and then pull the motor, and then I can finally TIG weld everything after the motor's out of the way and have a hard time getting into some of these places. Alright, even though I have a lot more welding to do, that concludes this video for the Coyote install and the frame rails of the F100. I'm going to go ahead and get the motor pulled out, final weld the brackets for the motor mounts and the motor mounts themselves and these tubes, and then go ahead and start working on the trans tunnel. I'll make a whole new video for building the trans tunnel and the new piece for the firewall. Thank you for watching. Sorry about the mustard.